are they long term? Because if you are, going into agriculture, for instance, oil palm, you want to go into oil palm, it takes at least 7 to 10 years before you start, getting some yield and benefit from your investment. Are we sure that the policies that are on ground today will be able to last that long? So that sustainability is very important. Then we need to think about capacity building. Do we have the people that will support, agribusiness on the ground? Do we have them? Have we really been thinking of capacity building? Today, if you look at our agriculture, big-time commercial agriculture is dominated by people from South Africa, people from Zimbabwe, and some other places. What about locals? Are we building that capacity for them to take over? So that is something that we also need to be thinking about. And then, whatever policies, whatever incentives are put in place, is there a level playing ground? That is a question that we need to address. Is it because I am very close to the minister that I will get some passages? What if I'm just coming, I know nobody, and we're inviting investors from offshore to come in? They have no local knowledge. So how do they act? How are they able, to stay on the ground and be able to do business in our country? So we need to have a level playing ground, policies and incentives that are very clearly defined so that everyone knows where he is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the brilliant points, but also for keeping to time. Let's give him another round of applause. So as to encourage our last panelists to do exactly the same. As I said, they'll have another round when we start taking questions from the audience. So the last of our panelists to speak at this point is Mr. Matho of I wrote it down here somewhere.
From Olam.
From Olam, yes. I always see things from Olam in my office, so please, let's hear you.
Right. Honorable ministers, state dignitaries, delegates, and fellow delegates, and the NESG board members. Firstly, thank you very much for providing a platform for bringing right on top the items that should be right on top in terms of the development agenda for this country. Coming from there, a brief word on Olam. Olam is not new to Nigeria. We started from here. We were born here 20 plus years ago. We are now listed in Singapore. We operate in 65 countries. We move around 16 million tons of agri-produce and food produce. We impact 3.5 million livelihoods and farmer livelihoods across the globe. 1 million of those are in Africa. 500,000 are in Nigeria. In the last few years, and I'd say 3 to 4 years, we've invested substantially in Nigeria because our heart is here. In all the commodities that we deal in and the food products that we deal in, we have grown only because we have participated and contributed to the government's development plans. And that's how we've evolved. We've evolved by working with what's important for the country's development. In line with that, when the need was for value addition, we invested in processing. So in cashew, for example, we've invested close to $50 million recently. We create jobs for almost 3,500 women workers, and we've managed to scale up production from close to about 8,000 tons to 40,000 tons. Very recently, we've also invested $50 million in 10,000 hectares of a rice farm in Nasarawa state. 1,000 hectares have already yielded results in excess of 5 tons per hectare. Currently, as we speak, we have prepared for planting 3,500 hectares. So I think this is a fairly, complex topic, but I think I'd like to approach it slightly differently. I'd say that we need to look at it both from the government side as well as from the investor side and see how the twain can meet. And this can only be done collaboratively. Coming to what the government is doing, I think, in terms of the country's leadership, there can be no doubt about the extraordinary vision that has been laid out in front of us and the willingness to bring about this transformation and the change. Now we need to set our objectives very clearly, and we need to pick on those products and areas where we can get a sustainable competitive advantage. As we pick our objectives in terms of crops, there are those that can substitute the revenue that oil provides, and there are those that are required for consumption here and self-sufficiency. The choice by now in terms of strategic priorities is pretty clear. 84 million hectares, 42% utilized, 5% irrigated, 45% wastage of the produce. If this were all to come good and come together, the potential for agriculture is 10 times what Nigeria is delivering today. Clearly then, oil should be on the back burner. Simple textbook management indicates that in terms of portfolio management, you milk the cash cow and you invest in the star, which is going to be the future. In our neighboring country, Ivory Coast, where they didn't have oil, they had cocoa beans and cocoa products. When that produce reached its maturity, they started taxing exports and products. Well, here, there's a case in point where we can actually look at doing the same and ensuring that we start supporting non-oil sector. Coming to what the investor really needs, whether big or small, investors come in various forms, shapes, sizes, but they all seek returns. The pressure comes, from shareholders where they're publicly held, and it may be a question of just survival for the small investor. We've been around now for 20 plus years in Nigeria, and if sometimes we shudder in terms of how things are going on, one can imagine the sheer plight of the new investors who are coming in. So I think first and foremost, as one of the delegates had pointed out, what's important is to have an investor forum where the key investors, we need to have a dialogue between the key ministries and the investors. The investors need a go-to person, a person who can then cut across the silos within the government channels and pave the way and handhold this investor. As one has mentioned already, the agri sector is unique in the way it needs to be managed. They necessarily need to participate in the communities in which they work. And this leads to large gestation periods, large upfront investments, and therefore the need, to handhold them and ensure that the returns come through. What do investors want? Investors want that the sign-on conditions be adhered to over time. And if they need to be changed, they should be discussed. And I'm sure we can find routes to this. All the investors who are in here are not short-term investors, they're not fly-by-night operators, they're here because they want to kind of grow in a sustainable fashion. If that be the case, then there is a strong case for, working together. And in that, while some of the areas have been highlighted, let me just draw upon a few more. As we choose our products, there's a case for choosing between products for exports and for local consumption. When we look at exports, and when we try to contain the macroeconomic environment stability, we find a certain degree of stability of the naira, but that makes exports more expensive. Therefore, is there a need, to sustain and do something special for exports is something that we need to look at. If cocoa as a crop is disadvantaged in its supplies to Europe because there is a 6% tax against goods from Nigeria, then there is something that we can address. A case that can be learned in terms of capacity building is that related to, perhaps the formation of, just a couple of minutes more, I can understand that, is a case in terms of driving the formation of cooperatives. If we can actually form, small landholders into cooperatives, their ability to get finances and draw in finances and everything else then starts working if that works well. I think that's one. And the second would be if the legal structures can be reinforced